Dr. Satcher, in our introduction, we mentioned the fact that the historical black colleges were established in the South following the war, and that they were a part of segregation. And we also made a distinction between what we call the new historical black colleges and the traditional historical black colleges. And I'd like for you to sort of give us a definition of what you believe those two institutions, those two separate sets of institutions represent.
Thank you, Dr. Haney. I appreciate the opportunity to provide some comments relative to the distinction between the historically black colleges as we know them in the South and the new historically black colleges as you refer to them. One thing that we must be cognizant of is that the constituency that we find that the traditional or the historically black colleges and universities that we know in the Deep South was not brought about by the volition of these institutions, but resulted from a rigid practice of segregation in the South. And we know that in 1896, the U.S. Supreme Court, to some extent, legitimized the policy of separate but equal. However, the rigid practice of segregation and racial discrimination as existed in this country after the Civil War led to these colleges being separate and unequal in many respects. And they were not fully or adequately supported. Therefore, they were not able to offer competitive programs for many years that they would have been capable of offering. The new historically black colleges and universities are colleges and universities on the periphery of the South or in the North, like Cheney State, Lincoln University. These colleges were not necessarily born out of a rigidly segregated society. That is, their doors, they have been able to admit students irrespective of their religion, state of origin, irrespective of race, without the rigid policy that you must be segregated because black students go here. In other words, we didn't create the policy. The policy was imposed on historically black colleges in the South that we could only admit historically black persons from black origin.
Now, your institution, Fisk University, is one of the earliest of the historical black colleges. That institution, I think, was established in 1866. Perhaps you could give us some information relative to its history and by way of talking about its history, to say some statements in reference to other colleges that would fall within that same category.
All right, at the commencing of Reconstruction or after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865 represented the founding of Fisk University. The university was founded by General Fisk. He was a general in the Union Army. He was associated with the American Missionary Society, and they were concerned about the plight of black people after slavery in the Southland. So their inspiration or their motivation in terms of founding Fisk University was out of a concern that blacks who had formerly been slaves would have the opportunity to be educated and would be able to become productive citizens in this society.
Now, Fisk being established in 1865, was it established originally as a college, or did it evolve eventually into a four-year institution?
It initially started out with the concentrating on educating on the high school level, and it developed in a matter of time into a college.
I guess you can say that that's probably the destiny of the overwhelming majority of what we call
that is the case.
Historical black institutions that were established during the period.
Yes.
Fisk being a private institution sort of represents something that is somewhat different than the newer state-supported historical black colleges. For example, I think we're going to talk about Tennessee State University on this program, and perhaps you would like to say something about the establishment of the public historical black colleges.
The establishment of the public historically black colleges was when the state governments began to assume a responsibility for the education of the former slaves. However, we must observe the fact that institutions like Fisk, which were in a southern setting, were somewhat victimized in the sense that they sought to operate in a non-discriminatory way. And in fact, in terms of the mission of Fisk University, it has never sought to operate with discrimination toward anyone.
I think that same thing might be said to be true of all of the overwhelming majority of the historical black colleges.
Right.
Dr. Satcher, if you were to talk about the importance of these institutions, what would you say about the importance and the benefit of the historical black institutions?
Well, I would say that we live in a pluralistic society where we have a diversity of ethnic groups. And I think the historically black colleges provide for the representation of this ethnic group, the minorities known as black Americans in this country. And I think this is healthy for our society, that we are able to have this outlet and provide opportunities for black persons to develop leadership in a majority setting of persons of similar backgrounds and interests. And I think also it provides for empowerment of the individual in terms of instilling in the individual confidence and self-security and self-concept. In other words, seldom on a historically white, the campus of a historically white institution, does a black have the opportunity of experiencing leadership.
Finally, Dr. Satcher, before we end this segment, Fisk University has proved its management ability. Recently, I think that they were awarded some $15,000 from Hospital Corporation of America. And as an institution that has overcome tremendous odds, what would you see as the future, not only of that institution, but the future of historical black colleges in general?
Well, I think historically black colleges are here to stay. It's just no question about it. But I think we are certainly operating with certain constraints in terms of adequate resources. But I think irrespective of that we will have a representative number of black colleges that will be in existence in this country.
Well, what could we do in order to strengthen the historical black colleges, both public and private?
Well, I think certainly the alumni of our various colleges and universities need to concentrate their efforts to support these institutions. We need to encourage our students, as well as any student that wishes to matriculate at these colleges and universities, to do so. I think, as I indicated, I think this is healthy for our society. As I see it, if historically black colleges and universities were to disappear, we would suffer what I would call a psychological and sociological deficit in this country in terms of adequate representation, in terms of role models for our youngsters, and in terms of actually being adequately representing ethnicity in our society.
Very well said. Dr. Satcher, we're going to have to break here for a commercial, after which we'll come back and talk about other aspects of the desegregation of historical black colleges. And thank you for coming by and being with us today, Dr. Satcher.
Thank you.